Hey, what's up guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing a Satellerknight deck profile. So this deck is one of the best decks to teach a beginner how to play around with Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a really fun deck if you already have been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And you get tired of decks that have all these elaborate combos, and you just want to make one card that's Trevere and just bounce everything back to hand and be able to stop your opponent from doing all sorts of shenanigans. It's a very simple deck that does what it does really well, and it does what it does correctly. It can overwhelm your opponent. It has built-in Solemn Strike, Searchers, Special Summons, all sorts of stuff, and you kind of can play this deck however you want, to be honest. So let's get straight into this, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on the stream, become part of the notification squad, and let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Satellerknight Deneb. Deneb is basically like the Searcher of the deck. Basically what this card is when it's summoned, you get to add a Tellarknight monster from your deck to your hand, which is really important for the deck. Then we play 3 copies of Satellerknight Altair. Altair is when it's summoned, you get to target a Tellarknight monster in your graveyard and special summon it in defense position, but you cannot attack with monsters except for Tellarknight monsters for the rest of the turn. 3 copies of Yugioh. This basically is when it's summoned, you get to send a Tellarknight monster from your deck to the graveyard. So basically it's like Foolish Burial. And then 2 copies of Vega. Vega is basically when this card is normal summoned, you get to special summon a Tellarknight monster from your hand. I'm thinking about bumping Vega up to 3 so you can have 3 of everything. And it would be a good option to make something like Utopia Double or something like that in the deck, but I have just got it at 2 for the moment. Then I play 3 copies of Thunder King Ryo. Thunder King Ryo is a good option in the deck because Thunder King Ryo adds that anti-meta ability to this deck. Neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them, and during either player's turn when your opponent would special summon a monster, you can send this card from your field to the graveyard and negate the summon, and if you do, destroy it, which is really good to be able to just negate special summons on the side of the field. And then I play 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring because you do need the hand traps in your deck. So 3 Ash Blossoms is the perfect number for me because I feel like you don't really need that much more in the deck because it already has so much other negation, especially with Thunder King Ryo and all sorts of other stuff. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing just a couple. And that is going to be 3 copies of Call by the Grave because we don't want to get hand trapped in this deck. It's really not optimal for us to get hand trapped. You can play through them, but you really don't want it to happen. 1 copy of Double or Nothing because you do make Utopia Double in this deck to be able to OTK your opponent. Extremely easy. It's extremely easy to make, especially with the Call of the Haunted and the Return of the Dragon Soul or Oasis of Dragon Souls in the deck to be able to revive your monsters back from the graveyard, to be able to just go into so many plays over and over again, to be able to just summon this and OTK your opponent with 10,000 attack points. 1 copy of Rhoda because it adds literally any of our Tellarknight monsters from our deck to our hand. 1 copy of Satellerknight Skybridge. Satellerknight Skybridge lets you target a Tellarknight monster you control and special summon 1 from your deck with a different name, and if you do, shuffle the target into the deck. So basically, shuffle 1 on your field into the deck, special summon 1 from the deck. And then, while the monster is special summoned by this effect is face up on the field, you cannot special summon monsters except for Tellarknight monsters, which is not that big of a deal because you're only ever going to really be special summoning Tellarknight monsters. But you're going to use this when you do need to get a different Tellarknight monster on the field to resolve something like an Altair. If you have Deneb on the field, you can activate this, summon an Altair from deck, and then revive 1 from graveyard, and then go into the Dark Tellarknight, detach material, discard a card, special summon Trevor, and then bounce everything onto the field because you did special summon nothing but Tellarknights in that combo. And then finally, for the last 3 spells, I'm going to be playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. Pot of Duality is really good for the deck because basically you just dig through the deck and you don't special summon every single turn, but it's an option to be able to just flip this and be able to add cards from deck to hand. It digs through deck and adds the particular card that you need into your hand at the given time. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a couple of traps, and that is going to be 3 copies of Stellar Nova Alpha. Basically, Stellar Nova Alpha is a Solemn Judgment-like card. When a spell trap or monster effect is activated, you can send a face-up Tellarknight monster you control to the graveyard, which this card is going to be usually live all the time. And then if you do, destroy the card and draw a card. So it replaces itself by letting you draw a card, and it goes 1 for 1 against one of your opponent's cards. But it can really hit the important cards that your opponent activates that your opponent has committed a lot of cards into. Like if your opponent's going to be negating something on your side of the field, you can Boarload Savage them. Or if they're going to hand trap you, you can negate hand traps with this. You can negate anything you want with this card. This card is one of the best, in my opinion, negations in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's still to this day. 2 copies of Fiendish Chain because it prevents your opponent from attacking, and it negates monster effects, which this card is really, really pivotal to the deck. 3 copies of Crackdown. Crackdown is another really good card. You're going to play a lot of continuous traps in this deck because continuous traps really work well with Trevere, being able to shuffle them or add them back to your hand, which is really, really important. But basically, you activate this card by targeting a face that monster your opponent controls. Take control of that monster, and while you control that monster, it cannot attack or activate effects. And then when that monster leaves the field, destroy this card. So that's not that big of a deal, but basically what you're trying to do is get the opponent's monsters off their side of the field as quickly as possible so you can do damage to your opponent. But you can always use them for link materials to go into other stuff like Bull Sword Dragon and stuff like that. So that is another option for you guys to be able to go into. But Crackdown is really, really, really good for the deck. 3 copies of Oasis of Dragon Souls. Basically, this is a revival trap that lets you special summon one of your monsters back, but it comes a worm monster, which is not that big of a deal, but basically it's just Call of the Haunted for defense position. And then 3 copies of Call of the Haunted. Call of the Haunted is basically just here because once you activate Call of the Haunted, you're going to be able to revive one of your Satellerknight monsters from the graveyard and put it back on the field so you can get more plays and more value out of your Satellerknight monsters because you're going to want to roll them as much as you can. So I have to quickly say this to you guys. This deck is a really good deck for beginners. I think I said that close to the beginning of the video, but if you really want to teach somebody to play Yu-Gi-Oh, this is probably one of the best decks that you can use to teach somebody because it's very, very simple and it's very, very easy to learn. Basically, you just have to memorize what the 4 or 5 main deck monsters really do, and then after you do, you just kind of have to move over to the extra deck and teach them a couple of cards in the extra deck, and it's really, really easy to learn. 3 copies of Satellerknight Trevere. Trevere is another really easy monster to go into in this deck, and it's the big boss monster of the deck. Basically, when it's XYZ summoned, you can shuffle all cards on the field into the hand, or put them back in the hand, which is really good, except himself, which is really good. Once per turn, you can detach from this card, send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard, and then if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, if this card is sent to the graveyard, while it has excess materials, you can target 1 Satellerknight monster in your graveyard and special summon it, which is really, really good. 1 copy of Deltaros. Basically, this card lets you detach a material from it to target a card on the field and destroy it. And then if it's sent to the graveyard while it has if it's sent to the graveyard period, you get to target a Satellerknight monster in your graveyard and special summon it, which is really good for the deck as well. And then when this card has XYZ materials, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when you normal or special summon a monster, which is really good for the deck as well because you don't want to let your opponent do those sorts of shenanigans and be able to stop you from doing your plays, like doing Solemn Judgments, Solemn Strikes, and all those, to be able to just stop you from doing that sort of thing. Then I play 1 copy of Stellar-Knight Constellar Diamond. This card basically can only be special summoned during the during the main phase 2 by overlaying it on top of a Stellar-Knight monster. And then it also has the ability that if any card, when this card is XYZ summoned, neither player can send cards from their deck to the graveyard, and any card that returns a card from the graveyard to the hand is banished instead. And then during either player's turn, when an opponent's monster that's a dark monster activates its effect, you can detach a material on this card and negate the activation you do destroy. It's kind of a shame that more hand traps are not dark, and their majority of them are like different attributes like Ash Blossom's Fire, Effect Veiler's Light, because this card could be really influential because you can negate a lot of stuff, but if you're playing against a dark deck, this card's really, really pivotal. 2 copies of the Dark Satellerknight. Dark Satellerknight basically lets you detach a material from it and discard a card to go into a Satellerknight XYZ monster that's any other Satellerknight XYZ monster, which usually you're going to go into Trevere or Deltaros. Those are the only 2 really that you're ever going to go into. 1 copy of Exciton Knight. Exciton Knight has the ability to blow a board, and that's why you play it as one of. Then I play the Utopia engine, which is Utopia the Lightning, Utopia Prime Utopia, because this lets you attack for 5,000 twice by going Utopia, then Utopia S Prime, and then Utopia the Lightning. You just overlay them on top of one another, like 1, 2, 3. And then you put it on the field to go into your opponent, and they can't activate cards or effects when Utopia the Lightning attacks. Then I play an extra copy of Utopia and an extra copy, or a copy of Utopia Double, because Utopia Double lets us attack for 10,000, which is extremely important, because basically what you're going to do is you're going to make Utopia the Double, detach material, add your copy of Double or Nothing to your hand, and then swing at your opponent for, or overlay into Utopia swing at your opponent for 5,000, detach material to negate the attack, drop double or nothing, and then swing again for 10,000. And then I play 1 copy of Boral Sword because it is a good option in the deck. It's the only dark monster besides the Dark Tellarknight that I play in the extra deck. And then 1 copy of Hippo Shinigami because this card boosts a lot of our Tellarknight monsters up by a considerable amount, so we can get so much more value out of our monsters. It makes Thunder King Ryo a force to be reckoned with at 2,400. It makes a lot of difference with our copies of the Satellerknight monsters in the extra deck. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's a super fun deck to play around with. Like I said, it's a really good deck for beginners, but it's also a really good deck for experienced Yu-Gi-Oh players that just get tired of all the crazy combos and they just want to go back and play something that's really simple to play around with. It does one thing and it does one thing right, and that's summoning Trevera to shuffle everything back into the hand, or putting it all back in the hand. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell on the channel, become part of the notification squad, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you around, guys.